Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 36 of the Squadron podcast. Lovely to have you here, as always.
That's us. We're the Spice Squadron, but we're the podcast. Yeah.
Nailed it. Now, you might wonder to yourself what we're doing this week on the podcast.
You saw the thumbnail.
You saw the thumbnail. Yeah. But what we're talking about is there was a massive tournament happening in America. It was
Like
PPG.
1,500 people. Wasn't it?
It was 150 people.
150. That's like 150 people.
It's a lot. It's the biggest tournament we've seen so far. It was a 5K tournament. So big prizes, big whompers.
Wampa?
So we're going to be talking about that. We're going to go over a couple of lists that we liked from that, a couple of things that we thought were interesting from that, and then we're going to
break down like the top 8, and then we're going to go through a couple of honorable mentions, because just before the video we saw like a really wacky Han deck that we want to talk about. But we're kind of going to break down the top 8, give a bit of a meta-analysis on how the meta has, frankly, drastically changed since this event.
Absolutely.
But first, we've got some spoilers.
Some spoilers just for you.
It's set 2, Shadows of the Galaxy,
and each one of these has a shadow on it. There are
true.
shadows.
True. Well, are there? Is on the third one there isn't. Oh yeah, I guess
shadow of the building on the other building. Yeah.
Shadow of the cloak or something.
Yeah.
Shadow. So we know what the bounty keyword does.
We do, and we got someone that utilizes the bounty keyword so well. It's a bit of a meme, but we love it anyway.
I love how flavorful it is.
It is Dr. Evazan.
Oh yeah, wanted on 12 systems.
Wanted on 12 systems.
He doesn't like you. His friend doesn't like you either. He's got little Pondu Baba, which is his mate, in the background, just chilling.
So he is a 2-cost cunning villainy 3/3 with shielded.
Dang,
and you might be saying,
that's busted.
Power creep. It's here.
This is here.
It's power creep.
You
is
lied.
here.
Spy Squadron lied to us. They're power creeping already.
What have I done? Bounty.
Oh boy. How many systems has he wanted in?
12.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's not relevant.
Yeah, no. When defeated, this gives your opponent the ability to untap 12 resources.
When it's captured or defeated.
When it's captured or defeated, just keep capturing this guy and then releasing him and then
up to 12
just keep going.
of the resources.
You got enough draw, you can just have an infinite turn with this guy.
Oh, damn.
Capture, release, capture, release, capture,
Capture,
release.
capture, release, capture, release, capture, release. Awooga.
Just build a deck entirely around if they play this one card.
If you're playing the blue-yellow Mandalorian, you can do it. If you've got enough Mandalorian's rifles, you got enough. Because theoretically, if you have a way to get back the 1-cost blue event, because you've already got the Razor Crest to get back the Mandalorian's rifle.
We're not doing this. We're not doing this right now.
It's really funny.
But this is a very interesting card. I think this card is definitely going to see some play. I think there is definitely a world where this card is useful, but it needs something else to go with it.
I agree.
It needs something to be like, turn off bounty, or...
This is definitely not a bad card to sneak attack in. Especially, like, I remember one thing you mentioned, you were like, this is a really good card to, like, sneak attack in turn 1 in Grand Inquisitor, because you can get, like...
6 damage off, and then he just dies.
And then, like, they've claimed by that point.
Yeah, and also, he dies at the end of the round, so...
So there's no, untap your resources. It's over, you've taken 6, so... It's interesting to remember that when we look at cards like this, yes, it definitely seems a bit memey right now, but we don't know what's in the set, and already there's some decent things this works with. Like GI, it works really well with. Sneak Attack, it works really well with. Most importantly, if we get cards that... I've seen some theories floating around because of this card. People are like, are we going to get Reverse Change of Heart, where you give people your cards so you can kill your bounties, which I think would be a genius mechanic. I remember
really
we saw Tyler release, just a quick one, Tyler, one of the game designers, Tyler Parrott, release a list of subtitles of cards in the new set.
Not cards, just their subtitles.
Just their subtitles. A lot of them are really fun. There's definitely some that we see that like, boom, has got to be Wrecker. And then the last one caught a lot of people's attention, which is That's Just Good Business. And that's definitely my boy Hondo Onaka.
Absolutely.
And I theorized, wouldn't it be cool if Hondo had the ability where when a bounty is claimed, you also get it, because that's just good business. So can you imagine being like, cool, you untap 12, but I untap 12.
Let's have this turn again.
You know, that bounty's draw a card, but hey, what if I draw a card too?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's pretty good.
Especially if we get him in a form of like a leader or something.
Oh, that would be
amazing.
awesome! Can you imagine that? Genuinely, that would be a really cool leader if that's his flip
like
side.
one, or like even just like once per turn, bounty you get
like
as well.
that could be his front side. You like exhaust him and you get the bounty. His flip side. Like I don't mind if that leader flips at like a hefty resource cost, and then you can build like a deck full of those bounty units, and that'd be genuinely that would be a very
that would be
kind
of cool.
That would be super cool. So. You know, you never know what's going to come for the set. Speaking of which, you know, you blue villain, you know it, you love it. Don't you wish it had more cheap Sentinels?
I do.
Well, here you go.
What?
This is a 2-cost 2/3 Vigilance villain, Underworld, Pike Sentinel, and do you know what ability it has? It's in the name. That's
Sentinel?
right. It's got Pike. No, it's got Sentinel. Very simple card, honestly. Not too much to say about it.
It's essentially the I just completely forgot the name of it. The 2-cost heroic unit, 2/3 saboteur.
Rebel Pathfinder.
Rebel Pathfinder of Sentinel. It's a 2-cost 2/3 with one of the keywords.
Yeah. This goes nicely in my Moff Gideon deck, which is literally just Sentinels. So I'm happy to have another one saboteur and my day is ruined.
No.
But I run like Cell Block Guards, Cloud City Wing Guards, Empress Royal Guards, Phase 3 Dark Troopers. You better believe that my Viper Probe Droids are coming out and my Pike Sentinels are going in. So there are definitely decks for this. I would give probably the two previous cards a 2.5 out of 5 on the Spy Summoner. Both fairly general. Both are niche and interesting, but I think both of them have their place in decks. And I think those numbers could be subject to change depending on what else we get.
Absolutely.
Now,
Speaking of subject to change and niche and interesting.
That's pretty cool.
And standard.
I honestly think this is I wouldn't say this is niche. I'd say this is probably another card that leads to Mandalorians are definitely the forefront of this set.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the follower of the way.
This is the way.
This is the way. One of the interesting things about this is it is a 2-cost neutral blue unit, implying that we may be getting Mandalorians on both sides of blue this set.
Now, that would be cool to see, or even just both sides. Because, do remember, we had the Death Watch, and most importantly, we had Gar Saxon, who paired with another theoretical leader in the set, which is Maul, during the Siege of Mandalore.
Absolutely.
Could see that. We know we're probably getting the Armorer. We've definitely got Din Djarin and the Mandalorian.
We have Bo-Katan that can be sitting there as a neutral unit, seeing as she has fought on both sides of that conflict.
Death Watch, and then she liberated Mandalore. But enough about those Mandalorians, and more about this Mandalorian. Notably, does have the Mandalorian keyword.
It does indeed. Does have the Mandalorian keyword. He is a 1/3. You might be thinking a 2-cost 1/3.
Weird.
That seems a little bit low, but his ability makes up for it by saying while this unit has while this unit is upgraded, it has +1/+1.
Now this is pretty good because I don't know about you guys, but putting the DL 44 on him and making it a 4/4 for 3, well, that's pretty nice.
Absolutely.
That's real nice.
Snapshot reflexes into making him a 3/5.
Yeah, that's awesome. Can you genuinely even out of color, or you could be running a Din Djarin deck, 2 cheeky hotshot DL44s, smuggle it in.
Yeah.
Get pay 3, put it on him, get him for 4. That's coming out of nowhere. That's pretty great. And we could also see, I think it's fairly likely, a Mandalorian Anthem. Hey, give all your other Mandalorians +1/+1. I think this card's pretty sweet. I mean, Academy training works really nice on it.
Mm-hmm. I think this is a card that gets out of hand really quickly.
Entrenched it.
That is, entrenching it makes it a 5/7.
That's really funny.
So 5/8.
Ooh, no. 5/7 was right.
No, 5/7 was right.
That is, I don't know. Can you imagine if it was each upgrade? Because
I think that is something that I have seen people thinking that it is, and people being like, "Oh my god, if I put a shield and something else,
No, that's actually pretty interesting too as well though. If it's shielded or has an experience counter, it gets that.
That is an upgrade.
That's really great.
But people are worth being like, if I give it 2 to experience counters, then
Unfortunately
it gets +2/+2. It's like, no.
Unfortunately not.
It is just...
It is upgraded, not for each upgrade.
Yep. So that's something to keep in mind, but it's still as a turn
great-
one play.
honestly, this is a great
I think
unit.
this gives you boundless options. You can be like, someone can be like, I got to remove that. You're like, I don't even.
I'm already really keen for
turn two play.
Mandalorian. I'm already keen for blue-red Mandalorian deck because you've got the 2-cost Sabine, you've got this as the way. Like I'm honestly, I'm here for low-cost Mandalorian upgrade
fun.
aggro.
And it's also the case of when you. When you're running the yellow-blue Mandalorian, you're sitting here like, cool, I'm going to make him a 4/4, and I'm going to rest a unit.
Yep. Tap that down. Make this boy a 4/4.
It just makes like every all this kind of stuff, and I think we're going to get a lot more when this is upgraded, when you put an upgrade on this unit, kind of things to synergize with all the upgrades that we're getting, and every single one makes
Seems
Mandalorian
like a lot of the upgrades
cooler.
this set are going to have immediate impact and not just in the sense of like, that's why I think they've been a lot more hush on showing us the upgrades, because upgrades play such a huge part in this set. Mandalorians play such a huge part in this set that even just showing us this, I think we're going to get a lot of immediate value, like the Hotshot DL44. I think there's going to be a lot of like, when you play this, you also get to do this. And can you imagine if there's an upgrade that just like, when the unit attacks, you can give an experience counter to a unit? That would be awesome.
That would be very cool. But that's all the spoilers. We only had the 3 spoilers. I'm sure by the time this video's come out, more have come out, and like one's going to come out tonight. We're going to be like, oh, why do we miss it? You know, remember set 1? Remember how that happened?
Give me a leader.
Every single week, and we were like, oh, why do we do this? And then we kept doing it. Good times.
We're good like this. But I give Follower of the Way a 3.5 out of 5. I think he's already pretty decent, and I think that honestly, we could definitely see this unit become like a 4, if not a 5, depending on the other Mandalorians and the upgrades and set.
Absolutely.
But we have some cool stuff to talk about because there was a big
indeed.
old tournament. Should we start with 8 and work our way up to number 1? Because I think we've got a lot to say about number 1.
We do have a lot to say about number 1. I will say, we can see it here. This was 143 players, and it was 8 rounds of Swiss into a top 16. So
Wooga.
And every single one of these games was best of 3, I believe.
Yes.
So it's one of those cases where
Big event.
to get to this top 8, you had to play all 9 best of 3s, and so the decks that have made it here are not slouches.
Tried and true, tested, and good job to everyone who went. Good job to everyone who went. Good job to everyone who played. Win or lose, good job. I think that's really good dedication, and frankly, already seeing tournaments like this, that's great for our game.
Absolutely.
This is so good.
Absolutely.
Like, there's genuinely fantastic numbers, really good event. Already people are excited. Like, I know we see a lot of doom stuff about like, oh, there's no product right now and stuff. But guys, honestly, our game is more alive than a lot of other card games right now. And that's a huge sign. So.
And we're going to say hi to our tried and true and tested, our absolute GOAT, the one that beats them all, the one that from the very beginning has been the bane of others' existence. It is Boba Green coming in at 8th place.
Here he is! He's collecting the bounty! So obviously this is Boba with Energy Conversion Lab. You know how it is, you know the rules, and so do I. Now, there's a couple of interesting things about this one. So, breaking it down, I would say this is a fairly standard Boba list. You know, you've got your Cunning, you've got your Change of Hearts, you've got your Crafty Smugglers, you got your Shoot First, Vaders, Bobas, you got the works. You know, you're aiming to ramp up and get into your 5-cost Steadfast Battalion just to take the game at that point. When you flip your Boba a turn early, get your Steadfast Battalion out, you got a really tight grip of the game, and there's a reason this Boba deck, you know, does what it does well.
And I think one of the big things to talk about this deck in particular is a particular card that I believe is in the sideboard of this deck. I'm not 100% sure.
There's 2 in the sideboard that I think
two
are
in
really
the sideboard. And it's a card that's come into Boba recently as a sideboard card to combat a recent growth in control.
Oh, there's 3 of those ones, what you're about to mention. There's 3 of those and 2 of the Emperor's Legion.
I was about to talk about Emperor's Legion. Where to spoil it.
Whoopsie.
So, yes, it is Emperor's Legion, and it is brought in specifically to counter Super Laser Blast.
Super Laser Blast,
being
Bombing
able to
Run, just like anything that's going to generally be like, hey, you got 5 units, Boba? Dead.
Yeah, Boba is very susceptible to Super Laser Blast. It's one of the big counters to that deck.
Really
is
hard
being able
to recover from that.
Yeah, it's really, really hard for them to recover, and that Emperor's Legion is actually a huge card to be able to help them get
your
back.
Vader back.
Like, 'cause at the end of the day, what it does is it gets back. Usually, on that turn where you flip Boba and you play a bunch of stuff, and then the next turn you play Fett's Fire Spray, it can get you back Fett's Fire Spray, maybe a Bosk, and a Crafty Smuggler back into your hand,
Probably
right?
a Vader. I mean, well, at that point, if you're playing against a deck that's using Super Laser Blast, you've probably got a couple of other turns before they're going to use it. So by the time they're Super Laser Blasting, you may have a Vader out, you may have a Fett's Fire Spray, and if they use it and you're like, man, pay 2, because all things considered, that's some good value. Paying 2, getting them all back, and then resetting yourself up. Because let me tell you, it can be pretty rough if you've Super Laser Blast and your opponent's follow-up plays and a Vader. Like, they Vadered before and they Vader right after. It can feel like, man, what was this work? But then there's another really awesome sideboard card they think is good. Now, they are paying 4 for it, but Spark a Rebellion to help combat. Especially with resource readying in this deck, being able to pay 4, just go and show me your hand, get that Avenger out, get that Super Laser Blast out. Hey man, get your ramp out of here. So
get that K2SO out.
Get that K2SO out. Just stopping those main big threats, because a Boba deck is happy to pay 4 for it because it's going to discard, deal with a threat on the board, untap, play another threat on the board, so it doesn't matter too much for you. And I think that's a genius sideboard. I really, really like that sideboard.
And I think one thing we're going to talk about a little bit, and there's a couple of decks that kind of have this kind of snuck in there, is that kind of discard and how important that can be in the current situation, what's happening.
For sure.
And I think there's a lot of decks at the moment that are quite susceptible to. You saw it on the gameplay not that long ago when I was playing that Boba deck.
Yeah, hand discard.
Again, and hand discard
really
just ruined it. It was really interesting, and it's something that's definitely been something that me and Reese have both been looking at.
I love
and
hand
seeing,
discard. I love that.
How much you can do with it, like, because it's really interesting how far you can go.
But that was the 8th place Boba Fett deck by Tyler Steinmeier. Thank you very much. We'll have the deck list popping up as we go. Now, on to number 7, Richard Douglas. Another refined palette, another a classic, if you will, a certified SWU classic. Richard Douglas on Green Sabine.
Absolutely, and Green Sabine is generally the more popular Sabine. We will be seeing a different Sabine coming up a little bit later. Take your guesses at what that might be. But the Green Sabine has been a really interesting one. There's been a lot of evolution in this deck as it's kind of moved from that hard balls to wall aggro that the yellow was to a more refined aggro of green.
It still is balls to the wall. I don't know what this guy's talking about.
I genuinely the
difference is 4 cores hits more.
With the cards, like, it's gone more high than wide, in my personal opinion. With the It
goes wide as.
It does go wide, but not as wide. The burst damage of yellow Sabine is much higher than the burst damage
The burst
of green
damage
Sabine.
is a lot more. I think green red versus yellow red was always like, the damage in green is more consistent, but the yellow is more explosive.
But a lower, more consistent damage rather than the waviness of yellow.
Some of the main changes to more of the general Sabine decks that you would feel, a lot of them run this now, but for those of you who haven't caught up, Bright Hopes are in the main board to help deal with the mirror. Because you flip your leader early, the only non-hero card in the main deck is the Steadfast Battalion, because you flip Sabine, the next turn you can ambush it in and deal some serious damage, buff Sabine up, get her big. And then also Metal Ceremony, you know, a lot of people go, that's a bit of a slower card, but it can help tempo, and in the mirror match, especially, I think that's where this card shines.
There's definitely times when you're like, all right, I can deal with this, I can stabilize here. I've done it a lot while playing green-blue Krennic. Where I've been like, I can stabilize off this, I'm good, and they go, and then a Metal Ceremony, and I'll give 3 +1/+1 counters, and you go, oh.
It's also really good in the mirror, because just being able to be like, okay, we're hitting each other, Rebel Assault, and then I will, get a 2-for-1 attack, you still have to spend those attacks, while you're spending an attack, I buff my guys, and then I claim, I'm ahead then, and I'm hitting you harder. So I think it's really good.
Yeah, it's usually used on that turn where you are flipping Sabine and swinging with her.
Yeah.
And that's usually the turn where you want to,
because, you Rebel Assault, then you flip Sabine, then you swing with her, then you bump,
Yeah.
bump, bump. Like that's definitely the gist. That's the ideal turn 4. Sideboard tech. We've got U-wing reinforcements for later game control. After someone's super laser blasts, you pay 7. Go and get the burst damage out there. Go get the fellas. I love Fighters for Freedom. A-wing off of this, and then they take 2 damage to their base.
Yep.
And then disabling Fang Fighter. Entrench has become a huge removal piece in the game.
It definitely
so being able to
has.
disabling Fang Fighter, removing an Entrench. A lot of the time they'll hit you K2SO, which naturally, yes, they're probably, K2 has Overwhelm, but if they're just going to, entrench him and then not worry about going ground anymore. And then finally, Wolf, counteract that Iden healing.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's just pretty straightforward. The sideboard is honestly really good. Sabine does Sabine things. She's going to smack. She's going to smack good. I think this is a pretty solid deck, all things considered.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a deck that we've seen 100 times before. And speaking of a deck we've seen 1,000 times before, this is the OG deck.
This is the OG
original deck. This is the starter deck. Coming in
It is.
at 6th, we have Ramp Vader.
Daniel Alcala is playing Ramp Vader. Nothing too new. But
No, just a
if it
kinda
ain't- If
classic.
it ain't broke,
Exactly.
don't fix it.
I think this is a deck that everybody knows is powerful.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody knows is fantastic. And I think at the end of the day, the red-green villain package is something
Yeah.
that can just do so much consistent damage over
curving
the
out
game.
and winning the top deck race late against, or even mid game against decks like Krennic, huge. And man, Vader is awful in terms of a strong threat. Vader is straight wacky.
There's very few things that can deal with Vader on the turn he deploys, and it's pretty much limited to Power of the Dark Side.
Power of the Dark Side, and also if your opponent wants to pay 7, and if they're in Krennic, they can Vader and Death Trooper, but then they're trading a Vader.
That only does
No, because they get
7.
the +1, I'm pretty sure, because they're 5, 2,
Oh, they play
2
the
from
Death
Death
and
Trooper, and then the
No,
Vader
yeah,
gets
yeah, yeah.
+1, so it's 9, I'm pretty sure. No, it is exactly 8.
It is exactly.
It's
it, yeah.
exactly 8, but they're paying 7 and losing a Vader, and all you've done is flipped and have all of your resources untapped. And they've ended that with a Death Trooper on the field. So you can be like, got my Vader. Anyway, here's a reinforcement walker.
Yeah. So it's definitely it's a fantastic deck. We know it's a fantastic deck.
Sideboard's really where it's at. We're talking a lot more about the sideboard than we are anything else because I guess that's where the tech comes in, right?
Well,
That's
that's
spicy-
what we haven't really
spicy
seen
tech.
before, right?
Yeah.
It's stuff that this is the first big best of 3 tournament that we've
One
seen.
thing
The
I will say about
sideboards are
this
so
deck
important.
Is there is no energy conversion lab. You notice that? It's just a 30 health base.
I did notice
pretty,
that.
Pretty interesting. Because most of the time, I personally definitely still love the ECL for ambushing in the DJ. But I get it, man. In an aggro heavy meta, or even in those grindier games, just having that 5 extra health,
It can be
sometimes
really
it can
helpful
be
and
so
really
good.
useful.
We've said it here 1,000 times. We'll say it again. There is literally nothing wrong with having 5 health.
What I do like about his sideboard is the Relentless. I think there's a very, very, very good card at the moment. And if you're, I would run it in the main board at the moment with the current meta and the changes that this tournament has made in the meta. But having the foresight to have it in your sideboard.
Relentless actively, actively unironically, just for most decks, shuts down Super Laser Blast. Because most people don't have the resource investment or low cost event cards to be able to go event Super Laser Blast, and by the time they do, man, they're dead. Relentless has been on the field for 3 turns. And that boy hits
absolutely.
a truck or a capital ship. So I think this is a huge tech, especially against decks in the first place deck that we're going to talk about.
And I really like also the bombing run. I've had a much newfound appreciation
good
of bombing
card,
run, especially against
Just
the
ruins Sabine.
It ruins
Literally
Sabine.
ruins Sabine.
If they're not paying attention and they're just I'll play 2 A-Wings and then I'll play my red 3 and you're I'm sorry, buddy, but no.
One thing that I've been learning to play with Sabine is adjusting is ideally you want to get into the rhythm of space, ground, space, ground, space. You want to spread it because if they super laser blast you, it's Jova anyway. But if they bombing run you, at least you've still got one lane to apply pressure. But man, a lot of people are caught off guard by the card. So I definitely think that this is a solid deck. It's definitely one that I'm thinking, because we've got Store Showdowns us coming up soon. It's definitely one that I'm personally thinking of locking in. Now, That was, I believe, where are we?
That was
Daniel Alcala. Now, Sabine Wren from Frank Myers.
Once again, Sabine, but now a different Sabine. And no, I know you all guessed that it was going to be the mono red Sabine that's been kind of creeping up on people and
It was a weird deck.
going around recently. It's not. It is the classic yellow Sabine coming back
Shopper
to play.
base? Is that lore accurate?
That's how you win. You play by law.
You play by lore accuracy.
But this deck is fairly standard for the kind of yellow Sabine that we know and love.
I want to point out
a couple of really interesting cards that have been added here, and I think that both of them are Wookiee-centered. One is Chewbacca, the 5 cost. I think that has come in very similarly to Bright Hope.
That's a really clutch card again, yeah, because Bright Hope in the mirror match, Bright Hope, Chewbacca, and Aussie Tuck Liberator Gunship give you a huge edge. Because being able to Chewbacca into a Sabine deck, man, most of them are 2. Most of them have 2. And you're an aggro deck too. So you put that boy down, Chewbacca's going to take 3 hits. That means you get 2 swings.
Yeah.
That is 6 damage and most likely 3 units dead on your opponent's board. That's huge. Aussie Tuck Liberator Gunship, your opponent's A-Wings in the mid to late game.
Yep.
A-Wing, like Aussie Tuck, they're red.
I think
3.
that 2 of Aussie Tuck
awesome.
there is a really good tech.
One of Greedo is really nice because Greedo actually can 2-for-1 a lot of units. He can. There's a lot of smaller units that might get damage on them easily, or you might have ways to deal with them. And just being able to go Greedo, ping something else for 2, make life a lot easier is really good too.
The one thing I think this deck is missing in the main board and the sideboard, one of the things that I would personally run in this because I've just found so much use for it, is that sneak attack. Especially in these aggro decks, it becomes incredible. There's so much stuff that you can do with it. And while I know that you are a bit tight on hand size for Sabine, there's so much stuff. Just a 2 of, I think, would be huge.
My personal favorite thing to do with sneak attack is just pay 2, Fleet Lieutenant, swing 5.
Yep. It's 5 damage just
5
off
damage,
the rip.
and they can't stop it. Actually, they can't interact with it. It's 5 damage and 1 action.
It is better than 4 cores, I believe in.
And it costs 1 less to do so.
And
unlike 4 cores,
you do need 2 cards in hand, but
you know, because there is some non-hero cards in this deck, naturally increasing the chance to miss. Not a lot. I mean, there's 1 Change of Heart, 1 Greedo, 3 Surprise Strike. I think that's it. But But, again, let's mention this. 1 of Change of Heart. Cheeky as. Get to the late game. Everything's burning out. Your opponent's finally gotten control of the board. They lay down their Avenger. They've got 8 health. And you go, a Change of Heart, your Avenger.
Absolutely.
A bulk for game.
Absolutely.
Now, that cheeky sideboard, a couple of interesting cards. Now, Wolf, pretty normal. Another Chewbacca, pretty normal. Covered off the... what's it called? The Mandalorian ship. The
Disabling Fangfighter.
Now, Infiltrator's skill, really interesting because you can get, again, in the mirrors and in the heavy control decks, being able to get around, we've seen Childson getting a huge resurgence, so being able to get around stuff like Childson, and interestingly enough, a lot of cards in this deck have 3 health. Being able to Infiltrator skill them takes them out of vigilance range.
Yes, absolutely, which is actually huge at the moment.
Genuinely really big. There is another interesting one in the form of Lando. I can see that maybe kind of being like in the late game, because everything you have is so cheap when you Lando, it's essentially like getting a big body and drawing 2 cards. So I can get it, but again, I think Lando being a 1-of is more because that's like it's like a last resort.
Yeah, I would love to see his reasoning, whether it's just something where he's like, I like Lando, so I want him in my side deck, or whether it was something that was actually bringing in matchups.
I genuinely believe it's because all of the units in Sabine are so cheap. Once you hit 6, you're running out of hand. So you play Lando, return 2 cards to your hand. You've got a 4/6 Saboteur. You've returned 2 cards for tempo.
It's not bad.
I don't think it's bad. I think it's actually really interesting. I actually think that the Infiltrator skill here is like a really good tech. I think it's a really, really good tech choice. Makes Sabine, it brackets Sabine out of takedown force choke.
Yep.
It brackets most of your small guys out of vigilance. Really huge stuff by doing stuff like that. It brackets a lot of your big guys just from getting straight killed by like small guy removal. It's really, really nice. And if you're in a deck that's running a lot of Sentinels, boom, got him.
Got him. But we're going to be moving on to the 4th place finisher, and this is also a Sabine. Again, we're going back to that green, and it's a very similar, deck to the previous green. One card that I'd like to point out that both of these run that is was a bit surprising to both me and Reese is the 2 of R2-D2s. I assume this is probably in there for some form, like a small amount of draw manipulation. Being able to, Sabine does suffer from being like, all right, I need some gas, and drawing 2 1-drops and being like, I can't do enough with these.
Interesting in this deck, comparatively to others, is that there is 1 Rebel Assault and 3 Dodonnas, comparatively to the 3 Rebel Assaults, 1 Dodonna in the previous list.
No, I've absolutely seen Dodonna go pretty hard, and it's one of those things where playing him, if you are able to play him...
on the Sabine turn, because you've usually got like 2 out, you're flipping Sabine...
And it takes Sabine out of that takedown or force choke range, right?
And like
as you were saying.
And that turn, they use it on Dodonna, and you're like, okay, flip Sabine. Like,
yeah,
it just doesn't matter.
If you have some stuff beforehand, they use it on that. You flip the Donna, you have Sabine, then you suddenly have quite a lot of damage coming through. And they need to remove the Donna, so the next turn you're pretty safe to play something.
One card I really like in this is Zeb. In the sideboard, Zeb is actually so absolutely incredible in the mirror match. Because you've both got your Sabines out. Things are looking rough. You just ambushed in a Zeb, killed their Sabine leader, and pinged something for 4 to kill it as well. And now they have to deal with a 5/5.
Yeah, absolutely. It is very, very good.
Pretty
and
nice.
that is, it's always been seen as a fantastic card when you coupled with that energy conversion lab.
Absolutely. There's a lot of nice ECL plays. Definitely not sure about the R2s. I guess it's maybe a consistency bump. I personally am not a big fan of it, but hey, if you want that consistency, you know your little droid got you.
Now we're coming into the top 3 now, and we have some really interesting decks coming up. Only one of them I would have assumed in the form that it took would be up here, if you had have asked me way back at the beginning of the meta, but all 3 of these decks are very, very interesting. At third, we have...
Philip Ritchie's Luke Skywalker.
Yes, absolutely. And we've seen a bit of a trend here away from the ECL.
Yeah, again, I think ECL, once again, is really good, but like, with Luke especially, it is one of those decks you can comfortably not run it, because the only card you're going to be ECLing in is Kanan, but effectively, you have the same effectivity by playing a Kanan turn 2 with a Alliance Dispatcher than you do realistically ambushing him in. I would rather play the Kanan turn 2 and have 5 extra health.
Yeah,
and I think
absolutely.
a lot of people can come to that conclusion. But this is pretty normal. This is pretty stock standard Luke. Interestingly, in the main deck, there is 1 takedown, 1 redemption, and 1 Akbar, and a large amount of devotion. 3 devotions. Now, that's really, for me, where it differs greatly from the rest of the list.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, a lot of the list is very similar to stuff we've seen. I think the Luke's lightsaber is generally fallen off the Luke decks recently, but I understand where it comes in as, like, Luke's lightsaber is a card that is useless a lot of the time and wins you the game the times where it is useful, right?
So either you resource it or side it out, but it's in there, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
Now, the sideboard here is very spicy. You've got your Laren for U-Wing. For when you U-Wing, you get your Laren out, you heal 3. You got your Restock, because Vigilance has become a huge card in the game.
Very
milling out in set 1 has become a kind of hit us like a truck, and we'll talk about that when we get to the first place deck. But definitely a card that you just need to run. Another home one, another Consortium Star Viper, those are pretty straightforward. Yeah. Now, Escort Skiff is a really cool card because it can be played on turn 2 with Alliance Dispatcher. And gets a nice ambush out, which is really, really solid. So that's a pretty interesting take. Everything else, though, in this deck, pretty stock standard, pretty straightforward. I'm still not sure if I'm crazy about 1 takedown. Like, I think I would maybe go 2-2 with the Devotion and 2 with the thing. But this deck looks like it was very heavily teched against decks like Sabine.
Yes. And I think that Devotion actually does show, because it means that stuff like Devotion means that Sabine has to take out the unit, and if Sabine is
Yeah.
attacking units, you're winning.
Yeah, because that's just less damage to base. And also, that whole time you're attacking their base and healing. So, like, put it on an arc and just be like, okay, swing your A-wing into me. Like, I'll trade. I'll make that trade.
I mean, you wouldn't even kill it with the +1/+1 from Devotion.
Hey, oh, that's pretty good.
So it's definitely a case where
I do love my Gluck, so I think I'm very happy to see Gluck make it in the top 8.
No,
let alone the
absolutely.
top
I think
3.
it's something that people have underestimated a lot.
It's a great deck.
And it's a fantastic deck. One of the best, probably the best mid-range deck, value deck that we have. Whereas a lot of
Absolutely.
it is going more control or more aggro. This is the deck that kind of sits in that middle and
Second-
has those options to control the board a little bit, but also has those options to pull
I
out some
completely agree.
damage.
So it was the deck I brought to my first locals, and it was the deck I went 4-0 with. So I love Gluck. Andrew Cox, bring us home. Andrew Cox coming in second and living up to the name. The man was collecting the bounty.
Absolutely.
He was
And I
coming
think
in-
this deck is pretty much identical to the previous.
There's a couple of other interesting includes here that I think are a little bit different that separate it. And I think, honestly, the separations from this one to the previous deck make a huge difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, namely, No Good To Me Dead is in there. Previous deck didn't have it. That's huge to deal with decks
It
that,
is a good-
that utilize Vader, Avenger as their finishing game. We know a lot of them do. So, you should be able to buy yourself a bit more time. Now, Recruit as a payoff to Search is solid as a 2-of. Gamorrean Guard is actually so good into Sabine.
Yeah, absolutely. Gamorrean Guard is one of those cards that
It's
is-
actually wacky. Like, it's actually really
yeah,
good into Sabine.
It's really good into a lot of decks. Like, 'cause obviously the aggro is the main thing you want those Sentinels for, but against a lot of things, it's just such an annoying card to deal
Just
with.
max them. And then, 2-of Cunning. At 6, baby, this is good. At 4, it's great. At 6, this is good. Tapping down stuff, bouncing stuff, even making your opponents discard, or, and most importantly of all, giving your Boba Fett leader +4/+0 to swing for 8.
Absolutely. Cunning, we know, is a fantastic card.
card.
Pretty much all of these double aspect cards are used in some form
Just,
recently.
they've been huge, like, especially Vigilance and Cunning.
Yeah.
Like, Command is a bit, and Aggression is great, but definitely when you use it in
Aggression is
Model
let down by the decks it can be run in,
Yeah.
not by...
Not by its abilities, but man, is Vigilance and Cunning, like, even at 6. And that's the making of, like, a good card. Nothing, not OP, but still worth running at 6. Once again, the sideboard here, chef's kiss. Really awesome and interesting stuff. Bit of a small ramp package in the terms of payoffs when it comes to Reinforcement Worker. Reinforcement Worker, love that stabilization late game.
Especially, like, if you get against those, like, kind of Sabine decks, you get to Reinforcement Walker, you win the game.
Yeah, because you're able to stabilize, taper out, start clearing their board. They can't come back, and you, my friend, are the winner. And number 1 on the big list of things that we think are rad and also cool. It's back. It's a capital ship. It's James's favorite art in the whole game, probably. It's Relentless. It's back, baby.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
it's just as good as ever. Remember when this
it's
card
so
came
good.
out and we were like, man, this is going to be good. And then it was.
It is very good. It's one of those cards that in the meta at the moment is so relevant, and I think seeing the Relentless in these sideboards proves to me that these people knew what they were doing. They did not reach top 8, and it's one of those things where Relentless could easily be forgotten to the side and not really run, but these people knew what they were doing, and they knew the meta, and they understood what was happening with the meta at the time, because this was in the middle of a very big change in the meta, and we're going to see that in the deck that won this, that really
huge change.
finalized the
Absolutely
shift in the
wacky.
meta that we'd been seeing.
And then once again, we see that cheeky Emperor's Legion as a 2-of.
Very good.
For the recovery. But, well, you know, I once said, I think Blue-Red Vader is going to be really good.
You did say that multiple times.
And I built it, and I felt like I wasn't getting anywhere with it. But I'm going to butcher your name, I'm so sorry. Gui Cohen, playing Darth Vader, Lord of the Sith, blue, red Vader. My problem with blue red Vader is I was a silly guy. I ran too many units.
Yep. This is a hyper control deck. This is a super control deck. Whatever you want to be calling it, it's here at the moment in the meta, and it's huge. It's come through massively with Iden and with Vader as this massive swing towards control on a scale we hadn't seen before.
I believe the dex ratio is 20 units, both ground and space, to 30 events.
Absolutely,
That is
and I think
wacky.
and it's wacky. It's crazy. How do you win, you say? How do you get enough units on board? You don't, is kind of the answer to that. A lot of the time, your win con in this type of deck is Avenger coming down and swinging, is Vader coming down and swinging, while you just clear everything your opponent can play.
But the real, actual, genuine win con of this deck is Mill. Actually, legitimately, factually, it's Mill. You vigilance your opponent, and every time you go, I heal 5, I mill you 6. And then you
Unless you're versing aggro, which you don't. But.
And then you sit there, or most of the time you heal 5, kill something. But then you sit there, and you just, that's it, you just sit there. You sit there and you go, all right, now draw your 2, and they go, I can't. You go, yeah, Avenger.
Absolutely. It is a deck that sucks to play against, really fun to play. It's one of those decks that people will call toxic because they haven't worked out how to beat it yet, and there's a massive shift in the meta, and people hate massive shifts in the meta towards decks they're not huge a fan of, so you may have seen a lot of, oh no, the end times are here, dooms naysayers that say this is the end of Star Wars Unlimited as we know it.
I definitely think that this deck is very good, but I've also had my butt kicked with it a bunch. So there are definitely ways around it. And you just got to not be so... It's all about pivoting and flexing the way you play. It's a tough deck. I'm not going to lie to you. I think this is a tough deck, and there's a lot of ways you build it, and it's real solid. But it's not the end of the times. Set 2 is just around the corner if you really want to get buckled down and be all like, oh, how are we ever going to get out of this meta? Guys, we're about to get 262 new cards. This thing is not sticking around. And if it is, boy, is it going to have contenders in the 16 new leaders in the set. So,
but let's go over what makes this deck very interesting.
What makes it special? What
What
makes it
makes it
special little guy?
Spicy boy. I think a lot of really cool stuff that comes out of this is using cards more consistently than you would in other things.
Using cards weirdly as well. Using cards that you wouldn't, like Charlton. But this deck has red, you say. Why would I ever run Charlton? Because you draw so much and it's predominantly blue. And honestly, dropping Charlton and making him a 4/4, we know Gamorrean Guard is good. So why isn't it Charlton?
Absolutely. I think the biggest thing that went from a 1 of maybe in the sideboard to a 3 of is Super Laser Blast. Is a massive card in this deck that just allows you to stabilize so hard. Yeah. It's almost a rule for me if I'm playing this sort of deck, I do not resource the Super Laser Blast.
You got to keep all 3.
Absolutely.
A main deck 1 restock for the Mirror,
which is a very, very grindy matchup.
Very grindy matchup. Other cards on the sideboard, Bombing Run, really good. Force Surrender, because if I'm going to be honest with you, a really good and consistent way to beat these decks is discard. Being able to discard their hands so they have no options is pretty solid, but it's still a bit of a grind.
We've seen a return of it, Devotion. It was a very interesting add to this. I think this is huge in this matchup because you're removing a lot of your opponent's stuff. They have a very hard time following that removal against those kind of aggro decks. You put down
and Vader can't heal, so it's a bit like you putting a Devotion onto Vader, swing, ping, heal, real solid. Like genuinely,
or even just your solid. System Patrolcraft. Throwing a Devotion onto that, making it a 4/6.
Put it on the Charlton.
4/5.
Put it on the Charlton.
Make him a
7/7 if you hit everything.
And then get some healing off while you're also blocking damage.
Yeah, it's really solid. Sideboard, interesting enough, you got Repair for aggro. It's needed. Vader's Lightsaber, just here and there if you want to take a more punchy route with Vader. You know, being able to play it. It counts as removal as well, and you get to smack face. And then Search Your Feelings is a one-of because it acts as a 4th copy of Super Laser Blast. Because you pay
Absolutely.
for,
I think
go
this
get your
is-
Super Laser Blast.
Pretty
pretty
it is
good.
definitely a card that's going in my sideboard for these kinds of decks
I mean, if
against the
I'm-
mirror mainly,
or
but
even-
also against any other kind of
even
slower
against
deck.
Sabine, like, if you're able to kill a bunch of stuff, you can actually have a turn to breathe and just be like, quickly pay 4, go get this, quickly, because I know I'm going to need it in a few turns. But in the mirror, like, honestly, I actually find this more useful against green, blue, Iden, and Krennic because they'll Vader, and they'll Vader late game, and they'll start building up. But you actually genuinely, with this deck, do get to the, like, just don't stop resourcing, because you will get to the resources where you can be like, damn, is that Devastator? You just played Devastator? And you go, yeah. And they're like, I just killed your Avenger, and you go, oh no, pay for Search Your Feelings. I wonder what I'm getting. And they're like, swing my Death Trooper at you, and you're like, yeah. Kill everything?
Or even just, here's a Vanquish.
True. Here's a Bombing Run.
Here's a Bombing Run. Here's a Vigilance. Here's the restock that I need for this mirror match. It's definitely a card that has a lot of value and can have a lot of value, especially in those mirror matches. But it is definitely a sideboard card because against certain matchups like that aggro matchup, a lot of the time you just don't have the time to play it.
That is absolutely correct. The deck can do a lot, but it is beatable. Once again, it can get clocked out by hyper aggro. Like if the aggro can just smack it and then smack it again, it really actually can do work, especially that yellow Sabine variant is pretty good. The problem is, I think this deck had a really good climb in this tournament for a number of reasons. One, it's genuinely a really good deck. Might not be everyone's playstyle. B, it's hard to play against.
Absolutely, yes.
And C, it really hard counters Krennic, Iden, and Boba. And I want to go through the breakdown for the total tournament right now of all 148 players. There were 37 Boba Fetts. There were 24 Sabines, 15 Vaders, 15 Idens, 12 Leias, 8 Palpatines, 7 Krennics, 5 Lukes, 4 GIs, let's go! 4 Tarkins, 4 Solos, 4 Chirrut Imways, 3 Chewbacca's. That's a surprise to me. I'm very happy you were there. All 3 of you, genuinely, we love you. 1 Thrawn player, I love you as well. And 1 Cassian player, because he had a cause he believed in.
Now, something that's very interesting about that, and a deck that we really want to talk about, is there's not often that in a tournament this big, a leader that only has 4 people playing it gets into the top 16.
Do we want to quickly break down the top 16?
I would love to break down the top 16.
So, we had 4 Boba Fetts, 4 Sabines, 3 Vaders, 1 Palpatine, 1 Luke, 1 Leia. And what's this?
1 Han Solo.
There he is.
And you're thinking, no, that makes sense.
That's the green Han Solo.
It's the green Han Solo that's been going around. Like everyone's been seeing it. It's got a lot of value to it. It's just missing a bit of pieces. But like it could get top 16. I'm not too worried about that.
And you're right. In a world where you're wrong.
Yeah, in the world where no. I opened this deck list thinking, oh, no, I assume this will be just the regular. And I was so wrong.
It's really funny.
When I saw Tarkin Town.
Yeah, so Tarkin Town, and this deck is one of those decks where the more you look at it, the more you're like, what? But then you look at it past the what, and you're like, oh. Like when I first saw this, I was like, this is stupid. And then I looked more, and I thought about the meta, and I went, this is still kind of stupid, but it's also really awesome.
Yeah.
Notably, for those of you with a keen eye, this is not just a yellow aggro deck. It's definitely got all the pieces there.
Yeah.
Like, you've got Red 3s, you've got Wing Leaders, you've got K2s, you've got Fleet Lieutenants.
Yeah, it's
rah,
there.
rah,
They're there. They're
all
having
there,
fun.
Blah, 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 you know, whatever. But you've also got 3 Force Throws, 3 Spark of Rebellion.
But I don't have any
Doesn't matter.
Force units.
Yeah, I know you don't. You also don't have double yellow, and you've got 2 Bodhi Rooks. And you've also got main deck in 3 of
Forced surrender.
What? Whoa! Hello? Whoa! Well, on the turn you flip hand, you're like 4 damage, drawing 2 cards and making them discard 2. I mean, like, hello. That's
This is a
pretty
deck
good.
That is designed around drawing cards
Discard.
and discarding cards.
I like hand discard.
And with a lot of these decks, the interim between that is control. In this, it's
aggro. It's just beating you up. I also love the late game tempo, the tempo keepers of a 1 black one and the 1 Lando, because honestly, they keep the tempo up. They keep it going. And then you've got the mid tempo pieces like R2D2 and C3PO in this deck are actually not that bad to fish for pieces. But man, this deck is genuinely really interesting. You've got 1 sneak attack, which is honestly totally valid because you can turn 2 sneak attack K2SO in, which I have done, and it is frankly wonderful. But you've also got your 1 of Change of Heart, 1 of Waylay, but just a lot of just like removal and discard, and just removing your opponent's. Sorry, not removal, just discard. I'm just removing your opponent's options, and it's all just like really good and really funny. Like honestly, turn 1, layer, and then force throw. Pay 2, untap 1, pay 1, force throw, discard a card, and then you turn 2, you just spark a rebellion them. And then like play your R2 or something. I don't know. Like there's a lot of really funny things you could do here. And as we saw, hand discard's pretty good.
And you can start to go hard.
Hand discard's nice. I think personally, I would like maybe consider taking Greedo out, putting Lethal and Surgeon in, and then if I could make room for it for a cause I believe in. But all in all things considered, this deck is really wacky fun, and it's Sideboard completes that. It's got a 3rd Greedo, 2nd Change of Heart, 3rd Bodhi Rook, 2nd Waylay, 3 Disabling Fang Fighters, 3 Wolves to fight the healing, because I can definitely see a deck like this going, and I really don't want to play against your Iden always heal a lot. So running a Wolf is really nice. Wolf has become a really solid just counter, especially against Luke as well. That deck heals out the wazoo.
Absolutely.
So just being able to do that. But I think that this deck is genuinely hilarious. Genuinely, Jeff Christensen, you have a mind that we here at the Spice Squadron love.
I respect this man more than I respect anyone else in this top 16, because if you showed this deck to anyone, they would tell you not to take it to the 143 player tournament, and you did, and you got there, and I respect that.
You beat that. You beat them folks. You got them good, and you know what?
You may have lost in the top 16, but you made it 8 rounds to the top 16.
8 rounds of best of 3 Swiss with Han discard.
And I respect it.
I don't just respect that. I love it. You're my new idol. You beat 127 people. You beat out. There was 143 there, and you, my friend,
you beat 127
of them.
And that, I think,
that's the beauty
is
of our
the
game.
beauty
That's
of the game. There's
game.
so many Bobas, and there's so many Sabines, and there's...
But then you've got the top 16, and at the top of the spectrum, you got red, blue Vader, and at the bottom of the spectrum, you got red, yellow Han discard.
And he's just having a good time.
I would. If I came 16th with that, I'd have the best time ever. I'd be leaving there feeling like I won that event. I'd be like, man, sure, bud, you can win your little thing with your blue, red Vader, but have you seen my discard? That's huge. So thank you for watching. Thank you to everyone who went to that tournament. Thanks for giving us something to talk about. It's been really interesting looking over these lists. I know that I'm going to make a few changes. We both definitely want to try that Han deck out.
Oh, yeah.
But it's really encouraging to see all of this stuff come out. Everyone really sticking to it. Everyone having a great time with it. So thank you so much. We'll be back next week to talk more spoilers. Go check out the gameplay this week. And most importantly, we love you.
Bye.
Bye.